Welcome back to Thinking, Reading, and the Outsiders. The most important things to remember from the last time we read is that the Greasers are getting ready for their Rumble, and they're pretty excited about it. But don't forget that Ponyboy just took 5 aspirin, which is too much to take, and hopefully he's feeling okay. Hey, Two-Bit, I said, deciding to complete my survey. How come you like to fight? He looked at me as if I was off my nut. Shoot, everybody fights. If everyone jumped in the Arkansas River, old Two-Bit would be right on their heels. I had it then. Soda fought for fun, Steve for hatred, Derry for pride, and Two-Bit for conformity. Why do I fight? I thought I couldn't think of a real good reason. There isn't any real good reason for fighting except self-defense. Listen, Soda, you and Ponyboy, Derry said as we strode down the street. If the fuzz show, you two beat it out of there. The rest of us can only get jailed. You two can get sent to a boys' home. Nobody's in the neighborhoods going to call the fuzz, Steve said grimly. They know what'd happen if they did. All the same, you two blow at the first sign of trouble. You hear me? You sure don't need an... Let's pretend I don't know this word. And so I'm going to use word identification to figure it out. It doesn't look like it has a prefix. Looks like it has a suffix, which is the IER, ire. So I'm going to use the rules of 2s and 3s. And I know that if something starts with that vowel, I'm only going to separate 2 letters. So AM, am. And then I know if it starts with a consonant, I'll separate 3 letters. So P-L-I, pl. And then F is just alone. F. Am, pl, f. So amplif is the root. And then ire. So amplifier. Amplifier. You sure don't need an amplifier, Soda said, and stuck out his tongue at the back of Derry's head. I stifled a giggle. If you want to see something funny, it's a tough hood sticking his tongue out at his big brother. Tim Shepard and company were already waiting when we arrived at the vacant lot, along with a gang from Brumley, one of the suburbs. Tim was lean, cat-like 18-year-old who looked like the model J.D. you see in movies and magazines. He had the right curly hair, smoldering dark eyes, and a long scar from temple to chin, where a tramp had belted him with a broken pop bottle. He had a tough, hard look to him, and his nose had been broken twice. Like Dolly's, his smile was grim and bitter. He was one of those who enjoyed being a hood. The rest of his bunch were the same way. The boys from Brumley, too. Young hoods, who would grow up to be old hoods. I'd never thought about it before, but they'd just get worse as they got older, not better. I looked at Derry. He wasn't going to be a hood when he got old. He was going to get somewhere. Living the way we do would only make him more determined to get somewhere. That's why he's better than the rest of us, I thought. He's going somewhere, and I was going to be like him. I wasn't going to live in a lousy neighborhood all of my life. Tim had the sense, hungry look of an alley cat. That's what he's always reminded me of, an alley cat, and he was constantly restless. His boys ranged from 15 to 19, hard-looking characters who were used to the strict discipline Tim gave out. That was the difference between his gang and ours. They had a leader and were organized. We were just buddies who stuck together. Each man was his own leader. Maybe that was why we could whip them. Tim and the leader of the Brumley outfit moved forward to shake hands with each of us, proving that our gangs were on the same side of this fight, although most of the guys in those two outfits weren't exactly what I'd call my friends. When Tim got to me, he studied me, maybe remembering how his kid brother and I had played chicken. You and the quiet black-headed kid were the ones who killed the Soshas. Yeah, I said, pretending to be proud of it. Then I thought of Cherry and Randy and got a sick feeling in my stomach. Good going, kid. Curly always said you were a good kid. Curly's in the reformatory for the next 6 months. Tim grinned ruefully, probably thinking of his roughneck, hard-headed brother. He got caught breaking into a liquor store. The little... He went on to call Curly every unprintable name under the sun, in Tim's way of thinking, terms of affection. I surveyed the scene with pride. I was the youngest one there. Even Curly, if he had been there, had turned 15, so he was older than me. I could tell Derry realized this too, and although he was proud, I also knew he was worried. Shoot, I thought, I'll fight so good this time he won't ever worry about me again. I'll show him that someone besides Soda Pop can use his head. One of the Brumley guys waved me over. We mostly stuck with our own outfits, so I was a little leery of going over to him, but I shrugged. He asked to borrow a weed, then lit up. That big guy with y'all, you know him pretty well? I ought to, he's my brother, I said. I couldn't honestly say yes, I knew Derry as well as he knew me, and that isn't saying a whole lot. No kiddin'. I got a feeling he's going to be asked to start the fireworks around here. He's a pretty good bopper. He meant rumbler. Those Brumley boys had a weird vocabularies. I doubt if half of them can read a newspaper or spell much more than their names, and it comes out in their speech. I mean, you take a guy that calls a rumble bop action, and you can tell he isn't real educated. Yep, I said. But why him? He shrugged. Why anyone else? I looked our outfits over. Most greasers don't have real tough builds or anything. They're mostly lean and kind of panther-looking in a slouchy way. This is partly because they don't eat much, and partly because they're slouchy. Derry looked like he could whip anyone there. I think most of the guys were nervous because of the no weapons rule. I didn't know about the Brumley boys, but I knew Shepard's gang were used to fighting with anything they could get their hands on. Bicycle chains, blades, pop bottles, pieces of pipe, pool sticks, or sometimes even heaters. I mean guns. I have a kind of lousy vocabulary too, even if I am educated. Our gang never went in for weapons. We're just not that rough. The only weapons we ever used were knives, and shoot, we carried them mostly just for looks. Like Two-Bit with the black-handed switch. None of us had ever really hurt anyone, or wanted to. Just Johnny, and he hadn't wanted to. Hey, Curtis, Tim yelled, and I jumped. Which one? I heard Soda yell back. The big one. Come on over here. The guy from Brumley looked at me. What'd I tell ya? I watched Jerry going through Tim and the leader of the Brumley boys. He shouldn't be here, I thought suddenly. I shouldn't be here, and Steve shouldn't be here, and Soda shouldn't be here, and Two-Bit shouldn't be here. We're greasers, but not hoods, and we don't belong with this bunch of future convicts. We could end up like them, I thought. We could. And the thought didn't help my headache. I went back to stand with Soda and Steve and Two-Bit then, because the Soshas were arriving, right on time. They came in 4 carloads and filed out silently. I counted 22 of them. There were 20 of us, so I figured the odds were as even as we could get them. Derry always liked to take on 2 at a time anyway. They looked like they were all cut from the same piece of cloth, clean-shaven with semi-beetle haircuts, wearing striped or checkered shirts, with light red or tan-colored jackets or Madras ski jackets. They could just as easily have been going to the movies as to a rumble. That's why people don't ever think to blame socias and are always ready to jump on us. We look hoodie and they look decent. It could be just the other way around. Half the hoods I know are pretty decent guys underneath all that grease. And from what I've learned or heard, a lot of socias are just cold-blooded mean. But people usually go by looks. They lined up silently, facing us, and we lined up facing them. I looked for Randy, but didn't see him. I hoped he wasn't there. A guy with a Madras shirt stepped up. Let's get the rules straight. Nothing but our fists, and the first to run loose, right? Tim flipped away his beer can. You savvy real good. There was an uneasy silence. Who was going to start it? Derry solved that problem. He stepped forward under the circle of light made by the street lamp. For a minute, everything looked unreal, like a scene out of a JD movie or something. Then Derry said, I'll take on anyone. He stood there, tall, broad shoulders, his muscles taut under his t-shirt, and his eyes glittering like ice. For a second, it looked like there wasn't anyone brave enough to take him on. Then there was a slight stir in the faceless mob of the socias, and a husky, blond guy stepped forward. He looked at Derry and said quietly, Hello, Daryl. Something flickered behind Derry's eyes, and then they were ice again. Hello, Paul. I heard Soda give a kind of squeak and realized that the blonde was Paul Holden. He had been the best halfback on Derry's football team at high school, and he and Derry used to buddy it around all the time. He must be a junior in college by now, I thought. He was looking at Derry with an expression I couldn't quite place, but disliked. Contempt? Pity? Hate? All three? Why? Because Derry was standing there representing all of us, and maybe Paul felt only contempt and pity and hate for greasers. Derry hadn't moved a muscle or changed an expression, but you could see he hated Paul now. He wasn't only jealous. Derry had a right to be jealous. He was ashamed to be on our side, ashamed to be seen with the Brumley boys, Shepard's gang, maybe even us. Nobody realized it but me and Soda. It didn't matter to anyone but me and Soda. That's stupid, I thought swiftly. They've both come here to fight, and they're both supposed to be smarter than that. What difference does the side make? Then Paul said, I'll take you. And something like a smile crossed Derry's face. I knew Derry had thought he could take Paul any time. But that was 2 or 3 years ago. What if Paul was better now? I swallowed. Neither one of my brothers had ever been beaten in a fight. I wasn't exactly itching for someone to break that record. They moved in a circle under the light, counterclockwise, eyeing each other, sizing each other up, maybe remembering old faults and wondering if they were still there. The rest of us waited with mounting tension. I was reminded of Jack London's books, where the wolf pack waits in silence for one of 2 members to go down in a fight. But it was different here. The moment either one swung a punch, the rumble would be on. All right, that's a good place to stop. The video will stop and you can make your response.